So I'm going to introduce Jeff Dempsey with Wide Orbit. I started Scott Studio with Wide Orbit, and he's got a good presentation to talk about. I think there's hardly any radio station, I guess, on the air now that doesn't have some form of automation. And it's just amazing that you go in now and there's nobody there. At the stations in Montgomery where I used to work at, on weekends, had 7 stations running, and on Saturday and Sunday, there's nobody there. I mean, that's just the way it works. And so you got to have some form of an automation system to do that. And so Wide Orbit now is one of the premier units that's out.
All right, cool. Well, I'm Jeff with Wide Orbit, obviously. Someone talk about successful automation implementations, and I'm not here pushing our product, just to kind of generally talk about the things that make an automation transition successful, because we've all been through really, really bad ones. Luckily, we don't have many really, really bad ones anymore because we plan properly, and that's the thing I want to focus on. I'm going to talk about the different staff members, how they are impacted by the automation systems, because it does impact every department within the station. It's not just engineering and IT. It's programming, it's traffic, it's continuity. Sales now has visibility into these systems if you grant it to them. And so I kind of want to focus on that. Obviously, audio over IP is changing audio wiring tremendously. So we'll just kind of get started with a couple of things. I've been around for about 30 years now. In fact, I was just talking to Ricky, who I used to work for at Scott Studios. In April will be my 20th year with the same group. So I've never really had a real job. And that's just it, planning. And this should start before you even buy the system. And just some of the basics, and I'm not telling you guys anything you don't already know, but hopefully there's just some nugget of something you can take out of this. Why are you upgrading? Is it, a lot of times people wait till the hardware die. We were just talking about keeping Maestros alive, which was also our product, but doesn't deal well with fast processors. So you can stock up on old P2s, as long as you can keep those audio cards safe. You'll keep that running for quite a while. Same thing with SS32, when you're dealing with older audio cards that PCI audio cards. Features, ongoing price. A lot of the systems charge quite a bit more annually in a lease arrangement. And so that may be a reason to change, as well as support. Some of the systems aren't doing very well financially, and their support is waned a bit. And so that could be another reason. I like to get everybody involved in the process. A lot of times, as engineers, as you know, your roles have changed. You might be the chief, and this is your baby, and you make the choice, and you're going to do that. Even after the fact, if you make that purchase, I like to get the automation vendor to work. Give the staff a demonstration. Show them that it's not going to bite them. Show them what they're going to gain. All the utilities they're going to have from their desk, the reduced workflow, and just the ease of use. And that way, when it's time for them to get off their duff and do something to make this happen, they're not going to fight you on it. Likewise, the air personalities. We've all got that one crotchety guy. I've been pushing this button for 30 years, and you're going to move that button. Well, show him that you can still have that button. Just it appears this way on this new screen. And by doing that, it kind of melts away those fears, and it just goes much more smoothly. I know Ricky and I both shown up in places and gear is still boxed up. And I had one guy in Evansville, Indiana, I remember, when there was like 40 boxes, it's like 5 radio stations. Walked in the door, and they had filled out a pre-installation checklist. Oh, it's all wired, it's all networked, talking to one another. Walk in, it's all sitting there in boxes. And he goes, well, the other vendors, this is Monday morning, I walk in the door. He goes, well, the other vendor is coming Friday with the U-Haul to pick up all their gear. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll be back in a week or two once you get it wired. It just went nuts. The reality is it was impossible to do. Nothing was wired, nothing was networking. There was no way we're going to get 5 radio stations done with audio conversions in that period of time. Obviously, wiring is something you're concerned with. So whether it's analog, digital, audio over IP, or a hybrid. And what I mean by a hybrid is I'm seeing a lot of folks now that have plants that have old analog consoles or traditional digital consoles. In fact, I've got one, I'm out of St. Louis, in mid-Missouri, that's going in, a bunch of old analog consoles, and they eventually want to go towards an Axia solution. So rather than sell him $20,000 worth of audio science cards, what I recommended is that we go with an Axia driver and just drop a node in every room you need it. And the bottom line is, even though those nodes have some price on them, it's still good 10 grand less than buying all these audio cards. That way, as they gradually add those consoles to the rooms, they can just pull the nodes out. And you can always use those for satellite receivers or something else anyway. And so that's what I mean when I talk about a hybrid. Programming. Obviously, programming has a lot to do with card numbers changing, audio categories, so on and so forth. IT, traffic, obviously. I'd say about 50% of the time, traffic really doesn't have to do much other than change the export from their traffic system. The other half of the time, they have to go and renumber every contract. And so there is some tedious work for them in that regard. Production, obviously, air personalities need trained. And sales, in our system anyway, we've got free browser utilities. So you can actually give read-only access, for instance, to commercial copy to your sales staff. So that's going to be a choice at a location-by-location basis. A lot of people don't want them to have access to anything. But in my opinion, if they can download and email their own spots, their own clients, it probably saves a good 7,500 man hours a year in a production guy doing that, and in a good 5 or 6 station building. And that's why I said to get them involved, because there are a lot of things everybody's going to have to do here. And it really doesn't involve engineering. And the problem is, and the reason why I bring this up to an engineering group, is because these are the guys that are going to hold up your project. It's not you plugging in the box. It's not networking it appropriately. It's these guys not doing their job because they've either fought the process, well, I'm not getting paid enough for this, this type of attitude. And that's why, even after you've made the decision to purchase and maybe even purchased it, I like to go through and do product demonstrations for these staffs because it makes that implementation so much easier, because they're going to go, I get it now. This is a good thing. And they'll actually put forth some effort. Programming, it's got a lot of stuff to do. Music categories, data fields and music scheduling systems. We'll talk about integrations with other products such as traffic, music scheduling, and a host of other things. Break note adjustments where they schedule promos and voice tracks and things. Missing music, and a big thing to me is music quality, and we were just talking about it. Unfortunately, there aren't that many vendors for uncompressed music anymore. If you've got someone playing compressed music and you're spending any amount of money on new gear, get the crap out. That is absolutely no need to be playing compressed music, MP3s, MP4s, MP2s for broadcast. Traffic, obviously, card number changing. They've got a bunch of desktop utilities, a bunch of reporting, and live copy functions they'll be able to do from their desk that they wouldn't have been able to do previously. Obviously, production, we've got audio conversions. And I'm talking about every vendor here, too. Whether it's RCS or Audio Vault or someone else. We can all convert each other's audio and retain that metadata. So that's a process we're going to go through. And none of us are fully successful. I'd say, if we can get 95% successful, we've done pretty well. We're always going to be missing some songs and some commercials. And clean out the old stuff before your new vendor comes in to even attempt to do that audio conversion. And air personalities simply need to be trained. The considerations you've obviously made are analog digital audio routing, and that hybrid which I was talking about, which is basically putting in audio drivers in an old analog plant. Routing platforms, we all use them, whether it's Axia, WheatNet, Harris consoles, Lawo, as well as I think there's 1 or 2 more we support now. All of the major systems use audio science cards. I think Audio Vault's still using Digigram. But with drivers, they're just a third of the cost. You go to buy a digital audio science card, you're looking at $3,600 retail. A 24-channel audio science or Axia drivers, $995. So you compare those costs as you're starting to shop around. Wiring, the audio over IP stuff, you're dropping a network cable. You're not dealing with multi-pair everywhere. Console automation, most of those drivers allow the automation systems to turn your pots on and off, fire from the console and those types of things without any hard wiring. So these are all considerations you need to take as you're comparing what consoles you've got or what you may get in the future before you purchase any automation system. Networking security is obviously a big thing. We had one client, the only one I'm aware of, that we've had one of those ransomware attacks on. And big station up in a small town, but a big station in Yankton, South Dakota. Covers all, biggest farm station in the nation. Locked up every single audio file they had. Luckily, they had an IT guy that was bright enough to take a USB drive with all their audio and put it in a sock drawer at home. Otherwise, they would have been in a real bind. So we've got to pay close attention to that. And security within it. I know us, NextGen and RCS, I'm not sure about the others, actually have logins where we have hierarchies of rights and privileges within the automation systems themselves. So you need to figure out who's going to do what you're going to allow them to do, before you actually show it to them. So as part of that demonstration process, kind of after the fact that I talk about, I go through with the engineer and programming management, what do you want them to see and what don't you want them to see? Because obviously there are things that you may very well not want salespeople to know or air personalities to know that you have the ability to do. Remote operation, obviously we've got, that's a picture of our tablet app that's coming out here in the spring. It's already done, but the version at the station back end isn't released yet. So you'll be able to fully voice track and remotely control the studio from a tablet. And a couple of the other systems already have those out. So you've obviously got to have that connectivity and VPN connection back to the station. What concerns are you guys seeing from an automation vendor that we may be unaware of, that we don't run into on a daily basis, that we could do a better job of doing? Or what could we do better with your staff to make transitions easier?
Training videos and manuals.
Okay. Manuals, we've got a pretty good job on. We are starting on videos, but I think it would be so much easier if we had one produced that, hey, here's how you voice track. Here's how you do this. And so my understanding is we are starting on those. They are not done yet. Hopefully some of the other, I'm sure some of the other vendors already do. But definitely I would agree with you there. I mean, that's basically all I really wanted to talk about is kind of preparing for these things. When it comes to the actual wiring, audio switching, audio routing, is there anything any questions I can answer on how we approach these things? Or do you want to see how our configuration screens look in dealing with these items? My boss is in Auburn and said I was missing something. So.
Where's the other slide?
What other? No, that's really all I've got. I mean, I can go through product demonstrations if you want, if you wish, but I don't want to sit here and force anybody to go through something like that.
It's coming out in the spring?
Yeah, 4 should be out the end of February, actually.
Okay.
Go ahead with the demo, Jeff. Why not?
Yeah.
Okay.
You might already do this, but in addition to training videos, you might see if there's a way to do an interactive training video.
We do. We already offer that. We offer that. Of course, we want to charge for it. But as a salesperson, we can also pre-configure those things. We do remote training. It's part of the sales template. If it's a simple enough operation, we don't have to send anyone on site anymore. If it's more than a couple people, sure, we want to. But we already offer online because we can simply hop on a WebEx type session and walk anyone through anything. And a lot of times that's what a regular support call will do, is we will dial in while you're sitting there watching it as well. So the training videos I know we're really lacking on. Our manuals are much better than they used to be. But the videos are something I hope we can get done pretty soon. Anything in particular about the automation you guys would like to see, or just kind of a nickel tour?
Yeah, nickel tour.
Okay.
Dime tour.
Dime tour?
Yeah.
Before you do that, what is the typical, let's say you've got a 4-station group, what's a typical install? About a week, 2?
Well, generally speaking, what I like to do is work a quarter out, if I can. That allows us to get the hardware in, allows us to have you send us your configurations from your other systems, as well as your audio, even if it's one of our old systems, so that we can adjust it, put it in place, have everything on the bench working. And then on average, 3 days per station, unless we're talking like a complicated news talker, then we'll extend it a bit.
But does that also include, say, would they send you their music library for conversion in Dallas or wherever it
Yeah.
happens to be? Really? Cool.
And you don't have to buy our hardware anymore. You know, our goal is to be less and less proprietary with hardware. Many of you are familiar with the Seneca/Arrow is the new name of the company. Gear we've been using for a decade. We're also now a Dell preferred vendor.
I noticed that.
Yeah.
That Auburn install was,
So, you know, it's your choice, and you can provide your own hardware. You know, I've got a guy up in Wisconsin who did a part cash, part trade deal with a guy who outspec'd my machines. I mean, he threw in, you know, quad-core Xeons every place, you know, and had a local maintenance contract built into that deal. It's like, sure, why not? We'd love to see the server in Dallas to configure it before we send it to you. If we could get it all, that'd be even better, but at least the server, and it just reduces time on site. But a lot of people like to, when it starts to cost-cutting time, and it's real competitive now. There are only a few of us big guys left, and we're all pretty much dollar for dollar, pretty darn close. You know, trimming off days on site is everybody's, you know, first thing they want to cut, and that is the last thing you want to do with any vendor, because that is the only thing that's going to guarantee your happiness and the satisfaction of your staff, is making sure that they know what they need to do their job. And make sure it's done right. You know, if I'm standing outside smoking a cigarette or drinking a cup of coffee, then it's time to go home. But we've all been through things where we're spending late nights and overnights doing things and babysitting satellites that you get towards the end of it and you're not done, and you know, we've got to take off on a plane, there's a problem. And so, in fact, it's what Ricky used to do. He used to schedule me on the field as a technician.
So part of that configuration, can you discuss Windows, you said that word 10, and the things you do to prepare it in terms of not updating and the issues we run into Win 10?
Oh, Windows 10, actually, we don't do a whole lot anymore. What we do, if you buy the PC from us, and I can get you a specific list. In fact, let me make a note here real quick. Because what we do is we get one build, and that's it. And most of that has to do with just turning off a couple of the automatic starts on some of the multimedia items within 10, but I need to provide you a list of that. So what I'll do is make sure and get this and any other notes and questions we have that I don't have the answer for, get it to Larry to distribute.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Because I am not the sharpest tool in the shed anymore. They talked me into the dark side too long ago.
Yeah, they've got a couple install guides for Windows 10 that tell you exactly what to turn off. And
That'd be great.
they've worked fine for us. We have them on all of our stations.
Cool. Yeah, there are a lot of one-sheeters and a lot of document. The manual is now something like 3,000 pages, a searchable PDF. But there's tons and tons of one-sheeters like you're talking about that we probably already have done. But as a sales geek, I don't look those up on a daily basis. So this is Wide Orbit Automation for Radio.
On the satellite control, are you able to take the serial data out of the receiver, or do you have to have all physical relays?
We have to have physical relays right now. My understanding is that we are adding serial and UDP communication from the satellite receivers. I can get an ETA on the UDP.
I'm guessing that's easier now that pretty much every major provider has gone to XDS.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why now that it's kind of standardized, they'll focus on it. When, you know, we had 14 different manufacturers, especially when we get into, you know, the kind of the Christian arm of things where they've got, you know, Wegner's and 6 other proprietary things they're dealing with, you can't code for all of them. But UDP, I know, has been requested numerous times, and I believe serial, you know what, and serial could be done, and I don't know it.
The serial data is working with the contact closures, but we're using it through Pathfinder.
Correct.
And letting Pathfinder do the implementation, and then that transfers into
That
wide
does.
orbit without any.
Correct, and we can now do that without Pathfinder as well.
Okay.
Yeah. They've rewritten the driver and our integration with it, so we can now talk natively in Axia's language. But yes, through Pathfinder works as well. And the same is true for WheatNet. But when it comes to taking serial, if I've got like an analog audio card, no. This is Wide Orbit Automation for Radio. Some of you have it, or have seen it, or worked with it, or installed it like Ricky. I like to think of this as more than a platform than an actual system or a program, because each one of these utilities that we call widgets is actually an entirely different program. And so what we have here is what you might think of as a merged log. So we've got from the music scheduler, music and promos, live copies been scheduled by traffic, obviously traffic commercials. You start any of them at any given point in time. Auto and manual is kind of obvious. You can pause things and continue to play them. Delete what you don't want to play. Preview lets you listen off air to anything, and I could give you some volume here, but lets you listen to things off air so you can trim up cuts or do some audio editing. Oh, hang on, got to turn preview off. Playlist here is more of a 24-hour view. So you can come in and find things that aired earlier, copy them, play them again, scroll down. Maybe if you've got a couple of songs, you can highlight the segue, and in a non-destructive manner, tell it to play back this one time only this way, and adjust audio levels. Next time it's scheduled, it will play back at its standard and normal levels and positioning. Some other things you can do is open up playlists from other days and other stations. You know, so I can open up another station in another day. So that's the one I didn't set up a playlist for. I'll drop a schedule in there in a minute. Let me open up one for this station for tomorrow. And so you can see I've got my schedules tabbed up here. This is also how you enter into voice tracking. So you'll notice this voice track here that's scheduled. So I can edit it. Voice track widget pops up. It's a very simple 4-step process. Let me fade that out since I only have one audio output on this laptop here. Listening to the first song. Now recording. And now I'll start the next song. And obviously I'm controlling the segue through that. So you can see what I've recorded in the segue editor. And just like you saw in the playlist, in a non-destructive manner, I can say play this back this time only in the schedule in this fashion. So you can go back in and tweak the voice tracks after you've recorded them. The space down here that is left empty is, as you saw, I had live copy over here on the live copy widget. If you had copy scheduled adjacent to the voice track, it would appear here. You can bring up the playlist so you can front and back cell, bring up some hotkeys if you want to talk over music beds and things while you're in the voice track widget. And it's important to note, this is the same software whether it's in the Air Studio production room or a transmitter backup. You just load the widgets you want. And what's interesting, now that we're getting to a point with, as you mentioned, 4.0 coming out in the spring, we're still in the 3.7 line of software versions now, we're able to completely virtualize everything. What we've done is we've broken the graphics away from the engine. So as those of you that are clients know, we have a couple of modules that run on the server. One is called Central Server, and it's the core functionality of scheduling, configuration, audio distribution. Then there's what we call Friendship Server, and that's what ties in central servers in different locations together. Intermarket voice tracking, intermarket file transfers, and those things. We've now added Radio Server, which is essentially the audio engine itself. So you'll always be able to have all of those on a single box, meaning you can have your traditional setup as we've always done with a central server and workstations. But now what you'll also be able to do is take real beefy servers, primary and a redundant. Depending on how many radio stations you want to run, we can load as many versions of Windows 10 on that server as you want and run 30 radio stations. Then we'll have a fully redundant backup server. And in the Air Studios, you have a little $100 NUC or just dumb PC or all-in-one PC to run the touchscreen, just to run the graphics. Everything is truly server-based. And so it's your choice how you want to install it and how you want to deal with that. When it comes to production machines, we still prefer those to be standalone so that they can be redundant outside of that configuration. What can I answer about that? Josh, he's giving me a funny look.
You'll still be able to do it the old way, though?
Yes. Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's called a radio server?
Radio server. It's basically the audio engine. We've just taken the graphics and the audio engine and separated them. It also has done a couple of things. As you know, we've always been tied to, when I say we, Scott Studios, have always been tied to audio science card for time shifting or stretch and squeeze, pitching. We're bringing that back onto the processors. So now anything, audio drivers, generic audio cards will have the same functionality as well.
So that's the virtualization of the system, essentially?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I know that a lot of people have asked me if anybody's doing that yet.
We have several, yeah.
And yeah, you and I talked about that.
Yeah, it's already out in testing mode, but it's just not in wide release yet. And they're still tweaking some things on it. And you don't want to be the first, one. No, I mean, the cutting edge is great, but you will bleed. And so you've got to be a special person to want to take that on. And luckily, we've got a bunch of wonderful clients that like testing. So, and most of them are in Canada.
I know you mentioned a redundant server.
Yes.
What happens if the main server crashes?
Second one picks up mid-song.
Okay, that's all automatic.
There's a heartbeat in between the two, an IP heartbeat.
Bulletproof.
And
Nothing's bulletproof, but it's
Remember the old days, they called it bulletproof?
no, it was invincible.
Invincible, yeah.
oh,
But,
I remember that. SS Invincible.
Yeah.
That was the tab that when you hit it, it crashes.
Yeah.
So the virtualized system, can it still use physical sound cards?
You know what? Yes, but that is your limitation is audio inputs and outputs.
That's what I thought.
But see, that's why, so let's talk about virtualization for a second. I'm just going to take version 4.0 here, and this, let's say, virtualized. Version 4.0 can still have a central server, and you can have your radio servers here that are redundant. Okay? I've got one of these going in a small town in central Missouri. So where normally you would have a central server in all your workstations, what they've got is a central server and 2 redundant radio servers. These are running 5 radio stations apiece. And this is a backup. If any of these 5 fail, this one will take over. On these radio servers, each one has a 24-channel Axia driver. In the studios, nodes. I know you can't read my writing, it's horrible. Does that kind of make sense? Now, when we're dealing with true virtualization, we've got 2 nice big beefy Windows servers that are running VMware. And what we can do here is load up 15 versions of Windows 10. These are also running central server. So you have a hot redundant backup for central server and for all 15 radio stations. Make sense? So there's a difference between 4.0 and true virtualization. But in each case, in the studios, you just need a dumb, simple PC to run the graphics is all, to control it. What this also does, if you saw that little graphic I had on that PowerPoint where we've got the tablet app, that's also how you're doing it because that tablet app is controlling the radio servers. Does that kind of make sense?
So the upgrade from 3.7 to 4.0.
Is you're probably going to keep the same architecture
Yeah.
unless you want to change it.
So if we do that, but to integrate the radio server,
We can put radio server on central server.
okay.
Does that make for existing clients?
Yes.
And a new installation is where you may want to change the architecture. I mean, there's just no point in going and spending $10,000 on servers
Sure.
if everything's working now and you just want to add remote functions, But in a new building, this brings a whole world of change. Each one of you has probably got cable or a dish at home. There's a couple hundred music channels that are operating in a basement in New York City with Axia drivers running 4 stations on a PC. That's all going to be narrowed down to a couple of monster servers because we're truly unlimited. The only limitation is the number of audio inputs and outputs. And by having 15 versions of Windows 10 times 24 channels, you got a lot of audio. And that can be WheatNet, that could be Harris, it could be any of those. I use Axia just because it's the most prevalent that I run into, as an example. Does that kind of make sense, or am I confusing anything?
Does that take a special type of computer?
It just has to meet processing specs.
Takes a really fast.
Yeah. Yeah, I won't even sell anything other than an i7 these days if it's actually playing audio because we're beefing it up so much. But servers, yeah, you get a multi-core processor on a server, we have no issues. And playing audio isn't that taxing on a system. It's voice tracking and file conversions that tax them. So that's why even in this environment, all your production machines and redundant or backup machines will still be standalone. So you're still ripping your music in the production machine and doing your voice tracking here. This is just actually running the station because it's not that taxing on processors. But we get into layers of VMware and the cost of these servers, you just have to see which is more and which is less. In an environment like I'm dealing with, in fact, it's Moberly, Missouri, they've got those 5 radio stations. They're saving, like I said, about 20 grand not putting audio science cards in all of these. But they're spending probably an extra 5 grand buying that second server. So it's you just got to weigh the pros and the cons and how your building's wired. I mean, if you've got all your wiring, hardwired into the consoles and studios, do you want to change that? If you're a contractor, does the owner want to pay you to change that? It all depends on what you want to do and what fits. And most installations are going to be different.
So that's why it's important for you to know how the station is pre-wired, because you have to configure the IOs.
Absolutely. Well, if they've got punch blocks, and keep in mind, you don't want a punch tool in my hand. It's very dangerous. Just bad things happen. But yeah, if you've got punch blocks and everything brought out, or if it's just hardwired, or the machines in the studios. It all depends. There's as you guys know better than I do, there's a heck of a big difference between a new facility and one that's, been there for 50 years. So the nice thing about all of these options, and even in a traditional environment where we just have, because we can still run this software with all that functionality, a central server and all the workstations. You've just got more flexibility on what you want to do, is really the bottom line. And when it comes to really big implementations, with 50 or more stations, and there are groups right now preparing to standardize things into one building now that there is no studio room. So you're going to see facilities with 50 and 100 radio stations real soon.
Jeff, can you talk about the software and hardware for standalone production room, and also in your training you mentioned remote users?
Yes.
So, like remote voice tracking?
Remote voice tracking with 4.0, we'll have a new module out that will actually look exactly like it ought to, as you see here. But also, I'd shown you a picture of, we've got the tablet app. There will also be a desktop app as well. Actually, it'll be the same app, but just morphed into a browser. But what that'll allow you to do is fully control, the studio. You can go to the car dealer and board up your own remote on a tablet. You'll be able to voice track in it while you're there. A lot of people pre-record their stuff for remotes. You can do that on those devices as well. And likewise, you'll be able to do it on any other device.
And that's beyond using your plugin for Audition.
Correct.
Production. It's actually
Yeah, this is separate. Yeah. In fact, I've got it loaded on my iPhone right now. I just don't have 4.0 to be able to pull it off for you, which is coming soon. But yeah, you can literally on your iPhone. And Apple is a client, and that's why we're starting with iPhones and iPads. It will be morphed over to Android eventually. I do not have a time frame on that, which will be nice because then you're dealing with $50 tablets rather than $500 tablets.
Now, that'll all be available if you're using a central server setup like with 3.7?
If you're on 4.0 or above. Like, for instance, you don't have to change your architecture because, as you know, if you've got our software maintenance and support agreement, you get free software upgrades. Yeah. So you can get that. Then you'll purchase the app by license from us. How many people simultaneously do you want to be able to remotely control that station? Okay. We're going to sell you a license for that.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's not outrageous. So.
Time frame for the desktop remote app will be the same as the Android?
I believe so.
You folks, okay.
Yeah. And this is the same's true. Zeta, RCS is Zeta, has a lot of this functionality as well already. I don't see them selling it much. I see NextGen in the field more than anything. But I think even something like Smarts has remote control apps. So this really isn't anything new, and we're actually kind of late to the game on getting to a lot of this remote control stuff. Hotkeys, just what you'd think. I'm going to breeze through some of the simple stuff. The library is interesting. It's actually a Google search engine. And this is another thing I really think, as I was talking earlier about getting all the departments together, talk about your metadata. You're not the only ones that use it anymore. It's now going to your cell phone apps, your websites, HD, RDS. We've got unlimited customizable metadata. So you'll see here, the first 4 fields are standard in our files, and we actually retain that data in the header of the file as we always used to with Scott Studios. The rest of these are all in our database. Our database happens to be a Postgres SQL database. What's nice about that is you get all the functionality without continually escalating Microsoft SQL fees, which is going to be a problem for some other users. But you can have whatever you want in here. You want iTunes tagging. You got an electronic billboard on the highway, RDS and HD. Who's got an Brigham Young University's got an obnoxious library. There's like 80 terabytes of uncompressed movements. It's a vast library, and it's hard to manage. How do you find what you want? So what they did is they added custom fields: composer, conductor, orchestra, soloist. So whether they're at their desk, outside of the building, or in a voice track studio, they can find what they're looking for. And obviously on the back end, we can export that to any place that needs that data, like your websites and cell phone apps and things. And so that's one thing. And this is facility, not corporate-wide. So it's a building. These are your data fields. And I think that's something that not only with us, but some of the other vendors you should look at as well, is find out what those functionalities are and what's needed by the other departments. You know, what would your program director like to do on the website that he's not doing now? Would he like a click-to-buy thing? You know, the iTunes tagging, all those types of things. Find out what they want, and that way you've got a system that actually meets those needs as well.
Jeff, can you discuss some of the back end specifically so the client does not have to get Arctic Palm or a middleware app? Are you saying you're
there are a couple of things. We have not fully developed anything that is near the advancement of running campaigns as the radio experience or Arctic Palm. I will show you configuration, and we do have documentation. On all of this, but we call that now playing information. So we can do text export definitions based on whatever you need. We also have what we call event drivers, so that we can have when a song starts or specific movement, what do you want it to output? So for instance, you know, you can have Coke on sale at Walmart when a specific spot ads run across your RDS, just because we've set up that data field to RDS. And mappings, we can also map events. I don't have that device server created in here. So there are one-sheeters on how to do this right now with anything you need. So if you need to export something without going through that middleware, we can certainly feed it directly to RDS and HD. We're just not going to run a custom concert campaign in between your music. That's where the middleware is really superior to what we're doing right now.
Well, artist experience is middleware. That's where you pay your license for your
Correct.
license. You got to do that. I'm an old RDS guy, so.
Yeah. But straight RDS feeds, we can do that. So we can have one set of behavior when you're in spots, one when you're in music, and then if we have that data in a separate field in commercials, we can also do that as well.
You said events. A lot of times, like, for example, morning shows, I like to be able to say Reggie Will or whatever for that.
Sure, you can have, for instance, you can have a wait command, what we used to call an AX event, that just does nothing but exports. As soon as they started, it will export. So you could say, you know, Bob and Tom on those types of things. But that's where I think the metadata is really going to be critical going forward. You know, obviously, the more and more streaming and, you know, the more Alexas and Google gadgets you talk to in your house. I'll be honest with you, at home, I listen to radio more on my Amazon Alexa than I don't have a physical radio anymore in the house. In the car I do, but at home I just listen to that.
Do you have a way to let people add metadata on the fly as things are being played?
Yes, both the Arctic experience as well as the radio experience and Arctic Palm do. I need to find out because that has been a standing request for a while. I don't know if we've coded it yet.
Except I've had diehard record players in the building before, and
Oh, yeah.
having the ability to let them put that in. I mean, you have people running whole shows on vinyl. So.
Yeah, internally we'd referred to that as Adhoc Messaging.
It would be good for you to do that, because you could have a
Well,
log.
we should. It's a simple,
Add that into your
it would be a
instance.
simple widget that would supplant the other data stream. It's, yeah, I don't see it being a problem. It's just a matter of having it prioritized. And to be honest, it could already be done, and I don't know it. I can't keep up with all of our features and as quickly as they come out. I mean, there's a 3.8 version that just came out a week or two ago. I mean, it's 5 pages of notes on feature enhancements and improvements. I just haven't read it. And so there are a lot of things that I'll be honest, I'm not up to speed on. But I'll certainly find an answer for you. You trim up your cuts here, so on and so forth. Start and end dates and times. Day parting, maybe in your programming clock you got a generic promo rotator, but you don't want the morning show promo to run during the morning show, so you just tell it not to play. Some simple scheduling things like that. Categories and cart number. Distribution's a lot different. I prefer for most of our clients to just dictate where cuts go, especially with more and more transmitter backup facilities and things that we're putting in. Meaning if I want this commercial category to go to all of my stations. And I don't want the hip hop to go to the country station, so on and so forth. We've got your basic waveform editor here. It's nothing fancy. You're not going to do any heavy lifting. It's handy basically just for kind of trimming cuts. Or if you want to come back and highlight a part of an interview or maybe a meteorologist forecast and throw it on a new cart number and insert it immediately. It's handy. Importing, I don't normally see clients doing this too much, but if you give them rights, they can browse the network and ingest cuts. Like maybe the morning show uses some actualities or news cuts or something. They could go find them and bring them in and edit them. And normalization, I think, has really done quite a number of great things. I'm not a big fan of doing this manually one cut at a time, which this button is for. On the back end in configuration, I'll show you how if American Country Countdown is lower than your music, how you can raise it upon ingest. And that's how I like to use it, because it makes things just simply sound better and less processing. You can, of course, record directly into it. Play chasing we've always done, but what's interesting about what was added for ESPN here is, think about like Sunday Night Baseball. They're playing back Sunday Night Baseball, but they're playing it back as it's recording. As it's recording with this button turned on and some configurations on the back end, that entire ball game and recording in real time is also being exported to the server so that their 50 production rooms up and down the hallway can be pulling out highlights for the halftime show or 7th inning stretch. And that really adds some cool new functionality if you're in a news talk or sports environment. Let me throw a schedule in here real quick. I'm doing this down and dirty and manually, so you'll just have. These are just simple text files at this juncture right here. On my HD station, I didn't throw a traffic file in. So I'm just going to throw a text file in there real quick for today. I wasn't caffeined up enough this morning when I scheduled music for the other. And it'll take it a second or two to process, and then it'll be in. But I want to show you some other things we can do. I think just to make that happen, I'll just restart it real quick. I'm syndicating to myself on these schedules. You know, right now with a traditional audio science card, generally speaking, we can go ahead and have up to 4 radio stations running simultaneously in a box. Most people don't, but when it comes to things like internet streaming insertion, translators, playing spots in a different market, it really does come in handy. Especially like the holiday season. Do you really want to have to buy another entire set of hardware just to stream Christmas music? You can actually do it out of another audio output on your existing AirStudio machine, and just don't put the widget up. So you'll see these breakaways. So when this breakaway hits, they'll both start playing their separate commercials. And then with what we call stretch and squeeze or time compression, we'll make sure those all start at the same time and are the exact same length. And so if you want to play different commercials in another market on a translator, we can do that. Same thing with spot insertion on the internet stream. A ton of folks use it for covering up sporting events that they're unable to restream. As an example, across the river from me out of St. Louis in little town Champaign, Illinois, they've got 2 music stations and a news talker. They don't have the rights to rebroadcast Rush Limbaugh or St. Louis Cardinals baseball on their internet stream. So rather than go dark as they had been, back in the rack room, there's one machine running 3 schedules. The 2 FMs simply play different commercials on the internet stream, but the AM will replay the best of the morning show when Rush Limbaugh comes on the air, so on and so forth. And we call that leader-follower. And those followers can be on the same box, down the hallway, or different time zones. So another example, I've got a guy up in Northern California that syndicates a morning show to 10 other markets in different time zones. So he's literally got a couple of PCs back there running just those external markets, and they pipe the audio straight to him.
Point of order, you mentioned playing different spots on the translator. That's illegal.
Yeah.
You're originating on the translator if you're not putting the original program from the station that's translating on the translator. So whoever you got doing that, setting yourself up for
Well, I can't tell you that. But they're doing it.
Depending on the situation, you can do underwriting announcements on a translator.
Yes.
Certain
Correct.
times a day. But not
30 seconds an hour. 30 seconds an hour.
Yeah.
But someone's doing it. But yeah, I see it a lot, mainly covering up like sporting events and things on internet streams.
Right over here in Macon, up and down I-75, there's several stations, used to be, the old Scott days. They did the same thing. They basically had their own satellite network going where they would carry the morning show, but each one of those markets, Macon and Warner Robins and everything, would play their different spots, and then they'd rejoin at the end. So it was...
We've got some other integrations that we do. A lot of folks are using Mr. Master for spots, automatically downloading things, basically border spots from networks that will accept directly. Music Master's one that early on integrated with us at a database level, meaning they took our API and they wrote what they wanted to do within our product. So if I want to replace this song, I'm actually searching. I thought I hit that. Oh, I'm not on any network right now. It's not going to work. So I'm not going to bother getting on the Wi-Fi here. But essentially, it'll go through and it'll actually look through Music Master and find appropriate songs for the jock to replace it with. So rather than give them rights to the whole library, you can restrict them to do things. You can also do things with this enable filter to go through and say, I want only 70s, of this length. That's kind of it on the Air Studio. What kind of questions do you have here? I know you probably don't want to spend much time on scheduling, but I'll touch on that as well here in a minute.
How does it interface with your EAS equipment?
Let me show you. Well, I can't really show you, but I will show you the configuration. Again, I didn't mention it, and I should have before. We've got a fully developed API. So for instance, Axia, I think you saw that graphic earlier. You can actually have your vMix on the screen and control your pots on your console physically when you're on a remote or local. EAS, what's interesting is Sage wrote this, and DASDEC wrote another one. I can't fully run the widget without having the NDEC here, but we simply network directly to that NDEC. And so what happens here, if you've got the widget loaded, and let's say you receive your weekly test, what happens is you get a red error message saying you've received your weekly test. You have 15 minutes or whatever time amount you put into the NDEC to insert this, and it'll say something like, you received your weekly test, you have 15 minutes to insert this, or we will automate the process. And so they have the opportunity to touch it and put it in where it sounds good. And if that time passes and it's fully automated, it will insert itself, which would be the open, the tone, and the close, to be the next thing in the schedule. So rather than chopping out of programming, you're at least having it line up and sound a little bit better. The same is true for DASDAC. It's just you've got one unit that's controlling 7 stations. The same functionalities there.
Tech support had told me with the EAS widget that when the alerts come up, like a warning, that it would flash the EAS at the bottom, and I've never been able to get it to do that.
You should be. I thought the button flashed here.
I've always been able to do the weekly tests, but I've never ever, like on a tornado or a thunderstorm.
Well, and the thing that I think we want to look at, and we'll exchange cards or something here in a minute, and we'll get to the bottom of it, is you don't have to take every warning they send down.
No.
It's actually selected in that SAGE or DASDAC unit which ones you take. And I'm not sure if you have to tell it to come to us or not.
Okay.
And here's what I'm saying is I don't know the configuration on the NDEC, but we should be able to find that out.
Okay.
Because that message, I believe, would actually be coming up here. And you can choose to have it break in if it is something urgent, like a tornado warning or something, or be inserted at a later time. Some other widgets that they've come up with, and there's going to be more and more that pop up here over time. But Canadian content you don't care about. Stop set timer is kind of handy. Well, there you go. The stop set monitor, what it is, and normally maybe you put it over here, is when I start a stop set, it'll count down the entire length of the break, not just one spot. So you can see kind of like the back timer on a song, I've got 4 minutes to walk out of the room. The player widget's also kind of handy. And this, if you want to think about it, and a lot of times, especially someone coming from Audio Vault or Maestro to us, that kind of operates more like a triple-decker cart machine, if you will. We can emulate that. I'm basically adding playback decks here. And what these are for, and there's a couple of good uses. First of all, if they want to go and find something and play it, this is always going to be on that pot, always started by this button. So if you've got one of those morning show guys that is used to having things in specific places, you can do that. But what's also handy is, let's say you've got a long interview or something, and you don't want to edit the file, you want to leave it in its original state. You can hit this edit button and say, when I touch this, I want you to start it from here, and I want you to end it here. So rather than taking the time to edit a file and permanently destroying it, or copying it to a new cart number, you can just load it in one of these decks and play just this portion. So a lot of news talk folks will do that with things like meteorologists, weather forecasts, stuff like that. It's just handy. We're integrated now audio with all the major newsroom systems, whether it's News Boss or I'm trying to think of the other one. It'll come to me. Come on, you guys got to be harder on me than this. Ricky especially.
Is your special set up for people that want to run a football or baseball, well, probably a baseball game?
There are.
For rain delays?
Yep, and that's what I'm getting into right now, which is Playlist Editor. And that's where we manage schedules. Whoop, did I even hit the button? There it is. Everything can be password protected, obviously.
Password is not a good password.
Admin is not a good password either, but I like it.
Does Nautel have a widget? We need a Nautel widget on that thing.
Why
So
not?
Just bring that GUI up right there in the corner of the screen.
There's no reason why not.
I know.
I mean, it's there.
Well, not for the jock. Who cares?
So playlist, basically what you do is you choose your station and your day if you want to edit it. And all these stations can be in the building, outside of the building, wherever you got it. I've obviously only got some schedules populated, so I'm going to edit today. Big difference between us and any of the older systems, I'd say, is it's kind of a living log. So you'll see here if I go to the library and I drag and drop something, it moves in real time. So it's and we've had that functionality since version 6. I think RCS Master Control always had it. But we finally got on the bandwagon. And that way, you'll notice this origin column. You know, traffic remerging a log doesn't screw up what programming is done, which has always been a legacy problem for DOS-based systems because a log would simply override a log. Now, if traffic were to export or music re-export, it will only replace what it originally put there anyway. Meaning it will not, if music re-exports a music log, it will not override any traffic. It will only go in its appropriate spot. Also in here we have template clocks. Some things you can do, for instance, skimming air personalities. We do not have a long form skimmer. It will come eventually. This is truly on-off on your microphone. We do have a lot of clients that use this that have out-of-town consultants that want to dial in with Audio Finder and listen to their jocks and things. Playlist templates. So let's just make one up. I'm going to create a template. So maybe I want to start off this satellite clock with a legal ID. I know. Yeah, I've got Mizzou. They suck anyway. But so anyway, legal ID. Well, what do I want to do now? These new entries, merge point is where we basically a traffic stop set. Playable entries where we just hard code. Skimming, segmented rule sets, which I'll show you in a little bit. But execute workflow. And a workflow, you can think of it as a command or a macro of a bunch of commands.
Just like your own name schedules?
Kind of.
Yeah.
But you know, for instance, if I want to route satellite audio, I'm going to go to Update Switcher. My system happens to be configured. You'll see how you can have multiple. So one station or 5 stations can all share one audio switcher. As long as we're networked, you choose which audio switcher or device you want to manipulate. So you may have an Axia routing platform in one studio, an 8x2 in one studio, and something else. As long as that audio can reach where it needs to, it's just a simple point and click. I want to put this on the air when I want to record Rush. So now that's my audio routing. And in configuration, which we'll get into in a little bit, if you had a routing platform, your entire WheatNet plant would be listed there, ins and outs. So I'm happy with that. Yes, save my changes. And let's talk about filling and stretching and squeezing. We have what we call segment rule sets. So it's basically, do you want to fill that break if traffic has put something in it but not filled it up? Do you want us to fill it constantly? And do you want to do it on a scheduled basis or in real time? So for instance, I like to do airtime fill. So let's say there's a 3-minute mandatory break and I don't know, Tom Joyner right back at you on Sunday morning. The reality is that copy's only 58 seconds each, so I'm 6 seconds short. And then a 30-second spot expires Friday night. So now I'm 36 seconds short. So what we can do is we can go and fill to the greatest amount you'd allow us. So like go pull a 30, stretch and squeeze to your tolerance for pitching, which hopefully isn't much more than 3% or so, because it will speed up and slow down. And then we can actually insert silence down to the 1,000th of a second in between those tracks. So that 3-minute break is always 3 minutes. You're never going to rejoin the network too early or too late. And this really makes complicated news talkers sound good. We've all heard bad ones where they're joining networks late, joining too early. There's no reason for that with this functionality. And we're bringing this onto generic audio cards too. So you don't have to have an Audio Science audio adapter with that Texas Instruments DSP chip anymore. You can have a $100 Focusrite. And that's kind of playlist editor. To get back in configuration before I go through some of these things, let me stop. I'm really caffeinated at this juncture of the morning, so I want to make sure I'm not missing anything anybody wants to talk about.
Is the front end of it still really well built on top of Java?
Yes. Will always be. And the reason why it's going to be available in Linux and other formats in the future. In fact, it will be fully Mac compatible sometime. I can't promise you when, but it's not too far off.
What, 4.0 will work on a Mac?
We're not going to support it. We have one client that does, and it's Apple. And all of their live streaming stations all use this. But it's not going to be released to the general populace until, because they're actually assisting us to write the code. And that's why we're starting with the iPad instead of Android, because they're actually working with us to make it. But it will eventually. Because they do make great hardware. User profiles is what I was going at. These are rights and privileges. Right now, these all have to be entered in specifically into our system. Our goal eventually is to have it roll up into your LDAP for your networking rights and privileges. Basically, you know, you've got a part-timer that keeps inserting the same Ozzy Osbourne song. You can stop them from doing that, or deleting commercials, or what have you. Username and password. What stations can they manipulate? And these could be things like your internet streams or HD channels, what have you, and categories. Let's say they delete commercials. Well, they can't do that anymore by just unchecking the box. Likewise, kind of ad nauseum, what can they or can't they do? Every single button function of the Air Studio or playlist editor can either be turned on or off. I recommend leaving it pretty wide open unless you've got a problem, because then you'll spend more time trying to manage rights than you are, you know, doing other things throughout the day. But if you have a problem, you can't stop folks from doing things. Audio Finder. It is a Google search engine for all of your audio. You can have this any place in the building. There's no charge for playlist editor or Audio Finder. So everybody that's networked can have rights to it if you give them rights. And so some of the things you can do is, you know, even without our traffic system, traffic can come in and change start and end dates from their desk without turning in production orders. You know, something that simple really saves a ton of time in a lot of trees. I mean, if I think about how many cart date extension production orders I went through in my life, I mean, I'd have a forest. Likewise, redistribution. You know, traffic goes, well, this station needs it now. Boom, they check the box, off it goes, without ever even opening the file. You know, let's pretend the Beatles are coming in concert here. So I can check all those. I can then mass change them, and on my car radio display, say call now to win tickets. Or Coke on sale at Walmart. So you can go through on just that Coke, that Walmart ad, and have that scroll on the car radio display when it plays, and mass change it. We don't have advanced scheduling features for that yet, and that's where TRE and Arctic Palm do a much better job. Restrictions and tools. Yeah. Another thing that's handy, and you'll think I'm crazy giving a salesperson rights to something, but you know what? Give them read-only rights to only the commercial category, and let them email their own spots to their own clients. That, again, is going to save a ton of time in production.
Yeah, in practicality, what I'm seeing for the RDS on specific spots, because it's so slow to display, most all the big markets are doing the whole spot set. They're selling the RDS separately, the whole spot set.
Really?
Yeah. I've seen that in a couple
You
of
can
places.
only get
I don't know.
about 20 words in a 60-second spot.
Yeah, I mean, it is pretty slow.
And of course, the advertiser wants.
Well, yeah, they
60
want.
words.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Salesperson sells.
But yeah, right now that's where Arctic Palm certainly got us beat. And we do sell it too, but and TRE does a decent job with some of those things as well. Some of the other things, without boring you too much, Medium Porter is really hot. I know it's kind of a boring looking screen, but let's say I run American Country Countdown on Sunday mornings. You can put in that any networking location. I just happen to put an FTP site. And I happen to know that that file comes down on Mondays about 1 p.m. So every Monday at 1 p.m., I'm constantly polling that network location. And what I'm doing is I'm using a rule. So let's say I want to call this American Country Countdown Hour 1, Segment 1. Every network's going to have some form of naming convention. You know, I happen to know that this one has a file name of ACCHR1, CG1. What the network does is they append the data it's supposed to air here, and so I can change my modifier to contains, and every Monday afternoon I'm going to pull that down, put it in a category, give it a cart number. I can customize any of the metadata I want for any of those exports. We can even do some fun stuff like end dates. And all this is documented and they'd be trained on it. I want this cart to be available 6 days after I download it. And the reason why is when the internet's down or the network didn't post a spot, come next Sunday, I'm not just playing last week's show. On Friday, when logs are exported for the weekend, I'm going to get an email back saying, this is past end date. You've got the wrong segment here. And so it can be fixed. Make sense? Because if I don't have an end date in there, it's going to simply play last week's show. And I don't want to have to hard code an end date every week. I want it to automatically behave like that, so we've got a couple little wildcard tricks in there. And this is where I would use normalization. We can now automatically trim up audio based on dB level as well, not just time. And you remember I was talking about stretch and squeeze, like how we can take that 58-second spot and make it 60? We can also do this with long-form programming as of version 3.7. So on Sunday morning, let's say I run a church service or something, or any syndicated show. And they can be 10 to 15 or 2 minutes off on time. We can now fill and stretch and squeeze those items as well. So I can say this program starts at 6 a.m. on Sunday morning and ends at 10 a.m. on Sunday morning. Make it 4 hours. And it will fill with the appropriate length items and then stretch and squeeze it to really finesse it. And that's a relatively new feature.
Is that automatic?
Yes. Yeah, we've always been able to do it in the stop sets, but they did it with the long form programming a couple of versions ago.
Okay. It'll monitor an FTP and pull the stuff down and stick it in.
It'll monitor whatever is in your fill categories. I mean, it will fill with what's in your fill category.
No. You just showed me. This will monitor the FTP and look for that specific segment.
Correct.
Grab it, name it, normalize it, stick it in the system.
Correct. On the playback clock, you tell it to be a 1 hour segment or whatever.
No, I'm not talking about stretch and squeezing.
Okay.
I'm talking about import, auto import.
Okay.
Email monitoring. I know it'll monitor an email and it'll look for an attachment and it'll stick it in the dub list.
Yes.
Are there any plans to make it do this instead of just sticking it in the dub list?
I will have to ask.
Because that's something that Al and I kludged together to make work, but it fills up the dub list, so somebody has to go purge the
Correct.
dub list like once every month or something like that.
What it is we've got a widget that will ingest and quarantine email audio attachments. So I can have, production KXXX as an email address and have a widget on the Ear Studio loaded in production more than likely. And where'd it go? There it is. And what would be listed here is a list of all the emails that you received last night that have audio attachments. That allows you to click on it, open it up, trim it up, send it to the Ear Studio, give it a cart number. And that's how they're dealing with some programming issues they've got, is they receive some programs by email.
Well, we're doing it for traffic as well.
Oh, you are as well?
Because that was the thing, because the question, because Al and I were sitting there and he said, I've never thought about that. And I said, this is what I wanted to do. So what we ended up doing was
And we can't get them to post those files on an FTP site?
No. They have a hard enough time attaching them to an email.
Yeah, FTP site, we're done, but
But what we ended up doing was Al called somebody and ended up having we set up a rule that monitors the folder that holds the dub list attachments.
yeah.
And then it looks for the attachment name, and if it contains whatever, then it just does the normal suck it in, stick it where it's supposed to go.
Okay.
But it fills up the dub list. We don't use the dub list, so there's a little note in the production room that says every Friday afternoon, please go clear the dub list.
I'll have to ask. I'll be honest with you, I don't know, and I'm not going to make up an answer.
Yeah, that's fine. So,
Not much more. I'm sure everybody's tired of hearing me gab. Report.
Can you go over the reports part? Because there's a spot on there for affidavits, and I've always wondered what it does.
Well, the best thing I'm going to probably do is I'll get you some documentation on it, but what you basically do is you pick a start, end, date, and time. I used to do this with Funny Record money years ago. I'm probably not going to have anything.
Okay.
Say only played media access, bill reports, and what it's going to do, it's got no records. But what would be listed, very similar to your missing spots report, listed as playlist validation here, is every time the spot played, it would be displayed in the same form. So it would look just like this. It would just say affidavit. And you can see here what I did was what was called the playlist validation here. Every time you export a log to us, whether it's a traffic and or music log, we in turn, and when I say we, I mean the server in your building, not us as some big cloud operation, is going to email your staff what's missing or what's wrong. You know, this American Country Countdown segment's missing, like I was referring to. Or Bob didn't record his voice tracks, or so on and so forth. And so those reports will be sent out automatically. Send feedback, get help. Obviously, if it's important, pick up the phone. But these actually open up tickets in our internal systems, just as though you picked up the telephone. You know, so if you, hey, I need to add a, a syndicated show, here's the format clock next week, you can submit it in that fashion. There's really not much more to show you. I mean, that's kind of the nickel tour. Device manager. Let's look at devices. And basically what you can do is set up, it's got basically an IP port for whatever the device manager is. What a device manager is I manage this device. So that means on this AirStudio machine, I can have a device manager for this 8x2 audio switcher. Or on the server, I could have it on a 16x4 switcher that all of the stations can access. Or on the server, I might have an entire WheatNet routing platform. And so that means when you're in the scheduling editor, you notice how I drop down which device I want to control. You just pick which device you want to control. And that allows you to route things. And so you can choose IP ports. As you can see, this is the specifics on this particular device and the specifics of this device. And down here is how you saw in the schedule editor where my inputs and outputs were. So whenever you install one of these items or a device manager anywhere in your system, you're going to define what it is. And they do have drop-down menus for various vendors like Axia and WheatNet and Lawo and stuff that will train you on how to use. I'm not the most proficient with this because I don't set these up anymore, but that's where you get to it.
Is that Jeff Schroeder? How about that?
Huh?
no, that's Jeff Switcher.
Oh, Jeff Switcher. He's contracting for us.
He's a whole other
He's
cat.
back in, huh?
Yeah, he's doing one for me in Nashville here in a couple of weeks.
Oh, wow.
Nashville Public Radio, in fact. Let's see. That's about it. I mean, what kind of questions? I mean, this is a lot to digest, and I didn't mean to.
The remote voice tracking, you mentioned Android or in this case iPhone eventually and
Yeah.
iPad and stuff like that. The actual equipment required. In the old days, obviously, you had to have a mix minus and something set up so that they could hear everything in context.
My understanding. I'm just bringing up that graphic real quick.
Yeah.
That wasn't it. Yeah, this guy here. That's actually just a screenshot of an actual iPad and what the graphics look like. We had it at the NAB this past year. It's just that we don't have 4.0 on the back end ready for distribution yet. That is already ready to go for
What I'm
remote.
talking about is the actual engineering breakout. Once you get that that input and output off of that
Correct.
jack,
Yeah.
what are you doing with that? I mean, how are you? Is it doing a mix minus in there?
I'm
giving
not
you
sure.
The ability, yeah.
I'm not sure. And Apple's actually developing it with us.
Okay,
So
cool.
they've got a little more insight than the hardware. And obviously, I don't have insight into that hardware. But yeah, it's supposed to be good to go. take care of the mix minus. And my understanding, there'll be a configuration we can kind of adjust levels to.
Sure.
Because obviously different music and different formats will be different, per station. So, yeah, the ETA on voice tracking, I don't know. This will be ready to go the second for remote control. The second 4.0 is released. Voice tracking is being added now.
Right now with the software the way it is in 3.7 or 3.8, what is the remote voice tracking?
It's the same as it always has been. The old
Okay.
one. Once 4.0 is released, it will actually be the same graphic set and the new back end as the voice tracker that's actually in the code. Right now, for those of you that haven't seen our product, our voice tracker, here, let me find a voice track here. The voice track in a remote location looks like our old 32-bit software. So, and that's what Ricky's referring to. And it's been a long time coming for that. We've been waiting for like 3
You're
years.
using something like VTVI?
Oh wait, yeah.
No, it's not, it looks like VTVI,
But it's not.
It's not.
Yeah.
Thankfully.
It's a cluster. Yeah. It works, but I mean, it's a kludge of our old front end, which was like, I'm trying to remember the language. It was Greg Kinney used to write in that language. I can't remember the name of it. Anyway.
Visual Basic?
It was Visual Basic,
Visual Basic.
and then the back end has just been changed to get us the appropriate files back and forth.
Because the meters on the remote voice tracker are real particular about your sound card.
Oh, yeah.
So,
And that's where another big switch is coming in with 4.0 is meters will be functional everywhere on everything. So for those of you that didn't know, originally the meters in this product were only keyed off of audio science cards. So while we would accept and use any audio card, the meters wouldn't function. And that's obviously changing, which has been on the map for years.
Jeff, if a station is using a third-party DAW in their production, whether like Pro Tools or
Yeah.
Adobe, how does that get into the system and
Sure.
get coded with the graph?
Absolutely, several different ways. We have a plugin for Adobe Audition just because it's the most popular out there. So as long as you're 3.0 or above, it literally just save as wide orbit and allows you to trim up the cut, start and end dates, title and artist information, so on and so forth. Another thing you can do is you can just save that as category and cart number to our ingest folder. When we receive audio, whether it's a network recording or various other things, you choose a folder to follow those rules. So for instance, I could have a folder on my server that media importer is watching just for pre-recorded remote broadcasts that someone just drops in from a phone or any other thing. You can have another one set up for Adobe Audition only or just another ingest folder. So you'll have an ingest folder and you could put in promo 1000 by saving the file as pro1000.wave. We automatically ingest it, make sure we convert it. We'll do any trimming or normalization on it, but it doesn't have any header information, meaning no title and artist. So what you can then do is go in the library and search up that promo 1000, find the cut, and now put your title and artist information and bring it up in the audio editor and trim it. So you can bring it in that direction. Or you can simply open it up in Adobe Audition and send it back to us.
But if they had like something like Pro Tools or something,
They save
when you got through, it's just a WAV file.
Yeah, they save it as PRO 1000, and you'll bring it up in any instance of our software, and you can slap title and artist and trim it up.
Part number and all that.
Yeah, and we do have lesser priced versions of what Workstation meant for people's like PD's desks and things. I know I've got, in fact, they were just named Country Station of the Year a couple weeks ago, WIL in St. Louis, and I've never seen anybody do this. They go in and they manually adjust the segue on every single song all day long from the program director's desk. So we do have lesser priced versions of the same software for those specific purposes. So you can have Workstation just to trim up cuts or just to ingest things from other folders. Yeah, we in fact reached out to Pro Tools and they just refused to save any data whatsoever. They just save the WAV file. There's no metadata. So there's nothing we can do with it if they don't do it. So
But you can still use it and import
Absolutely.
Go with this, put
Yep.
the data-
Just, you just need to save it as, promo 1000.
Either way, it's easier than TLC.
Correct. Yeah. And as we continue to develop things, I'm hopeful to get back down to Dallas here, probably late January, and get a little more visibility into the roadmap. Honestly, we don't get together, but aside from trade shows once or twice a year as a group, so I don't even know what's on the roadmap right now. We've just all busy taking care of our existing clients and, trying to find new ones. So there are a lot of things that I just don't know, but, I've got a number of things here. UDP and serial for satellite relays. What do we do to Windows 10 to prep it? Ad hoc messaging for things like RDS, HD, and might as well throw in just website graphics as well. Whole stop set metadata, and the doubleless behavior in email integration. So, and certainly anything else. Leave some cards here and pass them out and hang out for a while. But it's a lot to digest, and you're not supposed to get this for those of you that have never seen it. But I don't even know how many clients we're up to. We should be upwards around 3,000 in North America now with this product. Used to be back in Ricky and my day, we had half the entire market on Scott Studios. But that fell off a little bit, and now it's coming back. So.
Well, we couldn't figure out who owned us there for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Floundered around.
That's true.
Mark and Google.
Google had great parties.
Google was good.
And DMARC was good to us too. Yeah, it was kind of interesting about those transitions, is that we were sold not because we were bankrupt and going out of business. It's someone was willing to pay gobs of money for half of the radio market share. For instance, DMARC bought us to take that, 4,800, 5,400 station commercial market we had on our automation systems, build it into an ad distribution platform, and sell it to Google. That was the sole purpose for DMARC being there. And Google did that successfully. In fact, I left automation, if you remember, for a year or two and was managing several $1 million in ad spend for Google that was just flowing directly into people's radio stations. We were bartering, giving away automation systems just to get the inventory at that time.
That's right.
And we were selling it. And it was working. It just, Google wasn't able to impact the market they want to. Obviously they're a disruptive technology company. They like to come in and just change how it's done. Agencies didn't want it. The rep firms certainly didn't want it. That's all changing now. They call it programmatic now. And so that's happening. In fact, we're doing that. And that was the reason for all this. And wide orbit, if you're not familiar with, we've got an extraordinarily large share of the television traffic market in North America. It's like 84%.
Big companies start to see it into Cumulus is.
They just signed up,
Yep.
as have all the major radio groups, short of iHeart. So it's not just this little, the automation is a smaller portion of our business, but it's a big, strong company. And I think that's another thing, if you're shopping around, is have they already stated that they're going to go bankrupt? RCS is a great product and great company, but they're owned by iHeartMedia. Cumulus, kind of the same thing. Great company, but they're getting delisted from NASDAQ. So I don't know how all those things are going to work out.
Going back to what you mentioned in the beginning of your talk today, that what is the bare minimum? Say somebody who had some engineering skills. What is the bare minimum a station could get into a wide orbit? In other words, you were talking earlier, we can build our own boxes.
Yep.
We license the software from you.
Yep.
We also have to sign a tech support contract with you. Or do we have to? We have to.
Yes and no. I would insist on it the first year.
Yeah.
After that, it's optional.
Okay.
We don't even call it support anymore. We call it software maintenance.
Yeah.
So as long as you have that software maintenance and support contract, we never charge you for software upgrades. Most of the other folks do.
So let's say we buy our switchers, we buy our most of the
Do
logistics
it all yourself.
surrounding it. We're getting cards and
If
licensing from you?
Well, if it's an AM, remember, you can use generic today. It's just stretch and squeeze is the only thing that's not fully functional. So you can buy a $125 Focusrite 4 in, 4 out
Or
analog.
we can use engines or.
Yeah, we got a ton of folks using those, I'm trying to think of the other relatively inexpensive audio.
M-Audio, Delta.
M-Audio Deltas, but their breakout boxes kind of blow up
Yeah.
once in a while. But yeah, a bunch of Delta 44s out there. You know,
We'll pretty much skin this thing back to get it into.
I can get it down
budgets.
probably about $6,000 to $7,000. But keep in mind that also includes 3 days on site. By the time, because all you need is a central server and an Air Studio license. You know, if it's an internet stream or an HD, that price is in half. The key is training. We do not have the facilities now to completely remote train you. For instance, you would be a different example, as you used to install our products forever. Josh, you've been involved numerous times. So once Josh goes through another couple installations, he probably won't really need any help, just maybe some telephone support in doing it. You know, so it's a matter of who that individual is. You know, right now, and this has recently changed, and probably for the better, is my technical staff can now override me. Meaning I can throw in $1 million contract, but if I don't have enough training or the training they want, they can say, no, you cannot sell this. And that is before the proposal even goes out the door now. We used to do that years ago and stopped, came back. But, you know, when it comes to just the sheer software and that year support with a little bit of training, probably get it down about $6,000. You know, and that's Simeon pricing there, so.
Are you our guy in the southeast?
Brad, I have to look up the maps and see exactly where we land. I do have
Who does
Alabama now.
Florida?
Brad.
Okay.
But I always call Jeff, and I'm here.
Well, I'm talking, they sell with hardware, you know, for about $5,000. And it's just a different product.
We're talking bare bones with us doing
Oh,
all the, so is that 6 you're talking, that's no hardware, that's just.
That's no hardware right now. And,
But I mean,
and
when you can get an off-lease, you know, refurb Xeon computer for $400 with 8 gigs of RAM, I mean, providing your own hardware is the least of your concerns.
yeah, and so, but that's also something that we're working on. It's in conjunction with the training videos you'd mentioned. We're looking to be able to reduce that because we're now, we're basically sold out for quite a while, period. And it will be for several months. That's why we're actively hiring, if you know anybody by that, for field technicians. And all that information's on the website. But our goal is to, I've got some small operations like internet streamers, maybe college student stations and things, where I would like to do some training videos, an online setup, and online training as well. We haven't got the materials together to pull that off well yet. You know, we've all gone through bad implementations, and us not being there is going to assure you'll have one right now. And that's why we're just not doing it. But our goal is to do training videos and do some more online stuff. And so it's coming. No ETA, probably within a year. You know, certainly I'll be around for a while and leave a bunch of cards if I can help anybody or answer any questions. You know, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. I've got smarter people in Dallas for that. But I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much.